All right, so today I want to talk about the state of the Nintendo Switch online service that Nintendo has on the Switch. And I started to think about this a bit more after we had the most recent Super Nintendo games announced for the Nintendo Switch online service, because there was quite a bit of disappointment online around it. Of course, the like to dislike ratio on that announcement video is terrible for Nintendo, but I think at this point, a lot of people are coming to the unfortunate reality as to how Nintendo views their Switch online service. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So I think a lot of people, when they see how Nintendo is kind of evolving, we'll say, their Nintendo Switch online service, there's disappointment because a lot of people enjoy the idea of the Switch. The hybrid model, I mean, it just works. It's a great way to play your games because you have options, whether it's playing docked on a TV or, of course, playing in handheld mode around the house or even on the go with you. So I feel like just a lot of people enjoy the Switch for what it is. But I think there's also a lot of hope for what Nintendo could have the Switch become maybe someday. And when we see things like, well, on July 28th, Claymates, Jelly Boy, and Bomboozle coming to the Nintendo Switch online service, there's a bit of a reaction online because, well, people are disappointed and frustrated as to kind of where Nintendo is with this whole thing. Now, there's obviously two aspects to Nintendo Online service. We have the subscription side of things when it comes to the games that Nintendo has from their back catalog, and the subscription side of things when it comes to the features. I'm going to start with I guess the games that they have accessible to you, their retro library that has accumulated over 100 titles. And I think that's going to play into where we are now with the service, just the way that Nintendo kind of views like the value of their IPs and their games. So I looked over the last year that Nintendo has been adding games to this service. They've added 24 different games on the 7th, that'd be July 7th, 2020. Donkey Kong Country, Natsume Championship Wrestling, and The Immortal were added there, which was pretty cool because they added Donkey Kong Country and people liked those games. And they followed it up September 15th, 2020, because remember, they stopped doing monthly updates. They moved to like an update every 3 to 4 months or so. But this came a bit quicker in September. That was Donkey Kong Country 2, Mario Super Picross, The Peacekeepers, and Scat. Then moving up to December 14th, they completed that Donkey Kong trilogy with Donkey Kong Country 3, The Ignition Factor, Super Valis 4, Tough Enough, and Nightshade. Then moving up into 2021 is where things started to kind of fall a bit. And I started to notice that the like to dislike ratio started to favor more on the dislike side of things, because on like February 9th, for example, Doomsday Warrior, Psycho Dream, Prehistoric Man, and Fire and Ice. And then May 18th, Joe and Mac, Magical Drop 2, Super Baseball Simulator 1000, Spanky's Quest, and Ninja Jaja Maru. And then next week, we will see Claymates, Jelly Boy, and Bomboozle go to the service. Now, it was just recently that Nintendo crossed the 100 title mark on that service. It was May 18th, so not too long ago. And I'm kind of looking at this online service with how Nintendo has attached just this Netflix of their retro games basically to it. And I feel like Nintendo is caught in a hard spot right now for what they look at when it comes to their business, in that there's already enough value there in their mind for $20 a year with these games. And I almost feel like certain ones, like people have asked, Earthbound, is kind of being held back because there's no need to really announce. Like, I don't think Nintendo feels like they're getting new subscribers by announcing these games and adding onto that library. I think they're just looking to add stuff to it just to kind of keep up with their promise of adding games to it in the first place, but also just trying to have something to put on there for current subscribers. I mean, really, people are just signing up for this service because they have to, but I still think there would be a lot of excitement around certain titles going to this online subscription service when it comes to these retro games. Obviously, like a Super Mario RPG, that would be pretty cool to see that. I think Nintendo's biggest issue here, though, is that they're not adding things like Game Boy, because it's kind of walled them off from doing something as simple as dropping Metroid Fusion onto the Switch just through one of these updates to get people ready for Metroid Dread. Like, it should be working hand in hand with their new titles by kind of leveraging this retro library. It can get people excited and ready, and you hit that big marketing blitz with this dropping, say, in September ahead of that October Metroid Dread, and you just continue to push people towards these new franchise or new updates in these franchise that you're releasing for your holiday season. And unfortunately, the only way Nintendo, I think, can do that, get to a point where we have Nintendo 64 available, Game Boy Advance, maybe even GameCube, is if Nintendo charged more for it. Like, I feel like in their mind, they're capped a little bit here, and it goes all the way back to when they first introduced the service, because it appears when they brought it up, it was actually, it really had less features than the Wii U, and Nintendo wanted to charge this time for it. So they kind of used like the Nintendo games as a way to say, oh yeah, it's definitely worth $20 a year because we're going to give you these retro titles that we normally would have sold in the virtual console back on the Wii and the Wii U, and then we'll keep adding to it. And hey, they have. In fact, I think for $20 a year, it's hard to argue against having access to some really good games, and over 100 of them. Well, not all of them are great, but you have a lot of the classics from back in the day. The Zeldas are there, the Marios, Metroids, all that stuff. And once you pay your $20 for the year, you just have immediate access to all of them. So again, in Nintendo's mind, they're looking at that and saying, I think we're good. We just need to throw in a couple of games here or there. And you don't even really see big third parties show up for this, probably because Nintendo's not looking to pay out a ton of money for, say, a Chrono Trigger. That would probably cost quite a bit of money for Nintendo, since Square, let's be honest, could just drop that on the Switch at $20 and they would clean up. So basically, from what I can tell, it looks like Nintendo is forced to keep these games attached to that Nintendo Switch online service, just so it appears that it is valuable enough to be worth $20 a year. And what's unfortunate about that is I kind of think they're stuck, because they don't want to move N64 games in. They don't move Game Boy games or Game Boy Advance games in, because then that'd become too valuable in Nintendo's mind and almost a waste, unless they either raise the price of Nintendo Switch Online or figure out a way to separate it, that being the online access and this library of titles you have access to. The problem there is the online play itself and what they're offering has less features than what we have on things like the 3DS and the Wii U. And that even comes down to like a system level. Now, as for the features and services side of things, when it comes to the Nintendo Switch online fee of $20, of course, there's cloud saves, which really being able to back up your save games is completely tied behind this subscription fee. You can't back them up locally, which is pretty annoying. Obviously, you'd like to be able to at least have local backups of your games. And then, obviously, the online play. Now, from there, I think there were a lot of people who figured that, okay, if we're paying $20 a year now, as opposed to it being free before on like the 3DS or the Wii U, that money, maybe it'll be invested into continuing to build out the Switch and it'll become this really feature-rich system. Well, let's take a look at just basic system functionality that maybe they added over the last year. So I did look back over the last year or so to see what Nintendo has done with the Switch through those system updates that we would download, and of course, look to see what got moved around. Most of the time, though, it was just general system stability, but there were some notable features that they added. For example, they did add in the ability to do button mapping, where you could move buttons around and change them up at a system level. That was pretty cool to see. Of course, user icons, because why not? They do seem to do that a lot. You could prioritize your downloads between which game you wanted to download first. The ability to copy screenshots and video to a PC through a USB cable. You can also transfer screenshots and videos to cell phones wirelessly. They did add the Nintendo Switch Online app to the home menu. It's a little red icon kind of the bottom left, and it just sort of organizes some of the Nintendo Switch Online stuff into one area, and most of that is used for the Nintendo and Super Nintendo games being a bit easier to navigate. You pick it and then it'll launch whatever app you need to start the game up there. And then they also added the ability for the system, if it is downloading, say, an update patch for a game, if you don't have enough space, it'll be able to delete the old system update and then add the new update to the game and all this. And that's kind of it. And it's particularly head-scratching when you consider we're more than 4 years into this generation, and there are a lot of missing features that are widely requested. I mean, the basics, folders. These are system level things that you would expect. Themes. I mean, again, things that the 3DS really didn't have a lot of issues doing. Like if you think of themes, I remember when we first got the Switch, I was looking at it and they had themes. It was like light or dark mode basically. And I was like, oh, don't worry. I'm sure they'll add more. Well, it still is just light or dark mode for those themes. So there we go. Now, the most obvious one, especially when it comes to online, is communication with people, specifically on your friends list. And I know a lot of us are like, oh, we'll use Discord or any of the different ways you can get a hold of people. But I think the idea of being able to keep people on your platform, specifically in your ecosystem, and all it is just the basics of being able to send people a message, like that should be pretty straightforward to take care of. I mean, if they want to get crazy, a full system level party system would be great. Like on the Xbox, just as an example, you can kind of make a little party and talk to each other through voice chat right there on the system, and then decide, okay, what game are we going to start up here? What are we going to play? It makes things a lot easier, especially when you're jumping from game to game, to kind of keep everyone together. And while we're at it, why not achievements? I know this is something that people have talked about from time to time, and it becomes kind of a heated conversation at times, widely debated. But I think Nintendo would do some cool things with achievements. They'd probably come up with some interesting ideas. And why not? Why not have them try it out? It's just an extra thing to throw in there when it comes to playing these games. And Nintendo's done this with some of their games. Just in the game itself has achievements, like Luigi's Mansion, for example. So, like, why not come up with a system-wide kind of setup when it comes to achievements that you can carry with you onto the next Switch, maybe? But I think the most obvious one is that there are online games that just don't run well, even though it's $20 a year now, whereas it was free on the Wii U. And I'm not saying games like Smash Brothers has always ran well online. In fact, it's something that's talked about quite a bit. It's like the online for Smash just really is not good. And I will say some of that comes down to the way that people are connected, whether it's wireless and there's just all kinds of interference all over the house, or it's terrible signal, or the internet's just poor. But still, you figure if the online is being paid for now, you wouldn't have as many stories, and this overall belief that something like Smash Bros. Ultimate, which is like one of the best-selling games on the system, would struggle so badly when it comes to online multiplayer. Now, with all of that said, I have a couple of scenarios and possibilities here as to what's going on and maybe things we could see coming up here. So the first one is that Nintendo has become comfortable, and they believe that the amount of games that they have attached to online play and cloud save backup is enough to warrant the $20 a year, and going forward they'll have small or minimal updates to the service and the kind of games that you're seeing now. That's it going forward for the rest of this generation. The other possibility is that Nintendo really is this bad at online, and they're not really sure what to do as they go along because they've already attached this virtual console subscription service to online play, and they're not really sure how they can manage this going forward if they do want to separate it from the online play, which is very bare bones now with its feature set. And I guess the other possibility is that Nintendo has been working to do this massive overhaul of the Switch when it comes to its online play, its system functionality, features, all of this stuff, and that's why we're seeing so many updates that are just general stability and things being added into the firmware itself. And if we want to go off of what Nintendo did last year, we should be able to expect the next game update in September, and that would line up perfectly for incorporating Game Boy or Game Boy Advance into the Nintendo Online service. That way they could kind of sneak in Metroid Fusion for everyone to check out just ahead of Metroid Dread. Get everyone really excited for that launch. But this is Nintendo, and Nintendo's going to Nintendo, so I'm not really expecting it. I'm not really sure what else Nintendo's going to do here, because I almost feel like it's too late in the Switch generation for a massive overhaul of the Nintendo Switch Online service. And I mean, we might be going until next gen to hope that Nintendo could incorporate something like voice chat or messaging your friends, or like just some of the basic stuff. It's, again, very odd, but it's a weird situation that Nintendo's in, and I think they have just become comfortable with it. So let me know what you guys think about this whole situation around the Nintendo Switch Online and kind of this unfortunate reality I think people are starting to realize here as we start to see things like Claymates, Jelly Boy, and Bomboozle get added. while we have update after update coming out that's mostly just general system stability. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.